I want to talk to you about three amazing words. In a moment, I'm going to put them on the screen. Then we're going to go into a deep Bible study, and I want you to have your thinking cap well adjusted. And I believe this will be a tremendous help to you. So let's look at our first graphic on the screen, and you're going to see these three amazing words. You can see them there, and here is the first one. These first two are Greek, and the third one is from the Latin. Thlipsis. Thlipsis. The number there, 2347, is the number in the Strong's Concordance where you can look it up. Number two, hupomone. Hupomone. 5281 in the Strong's. And then a word really from the Latin, fortis. Fortis. Come back to me. Now we're going to go to another one of these in a moment where we'll explain this deeper. Let's get some of this heavier stuff out of the way at the beginning, and then we'll go forward. And I have reference books here and various things to help both of us to understand this subject that we're going to be dealing with. What is the purpose of pressure? How do you handle pressure? How did the Apostle Paul handle pressure? What is it like to be, quote, pressed beyond measure, above strength, even to despair of your very life? I quoted these scriptures some time ago on a recent telecast, but we're going to go into it even deeper this time. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to go to our second and last graphic at this time, and we're going to see the meanings, and then we'll grab our Bibles and get into the book of Corinthians in a moment or two. So here we go again, and this is graphic number 2. You can see it on your screen there. The Greek word is thlipsis, and it means trouble or tribulation, literally to be pressed. Literally to be crushed, pressured, squeezed to the point of breaking. Thlipsis, translated either as trouble or tribulation. Hupomone means endurance, but not just gritty endurance, but endurance with hope and with triumph. Fortis is translated in Corinthians as comfort. The comfort of God that makes a person brave, even in the middle of their thlipsis, or in the middle of their tribulation. Now you can come back to me. So we have these three amazing words. Now there's more to this, of course, as we go along, but that opening shot there gives you an idea of what we're going to be looking at. Trouble, tribulation, pressure, how to handle crushing pressure to the point where it looks like it's going to break you. How you can instead endure, but not just in a miserable way, but endure with joy and triumph. And how you can experience the comfort of God, fortis in the Latin, how you can have God's consolation that makes you brave and, as the word suggests, gives you fortitude and triumph in the middle of despair. Now here is what the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 10. In fact, we're going to read verses 10, 11, and 12. 2 Corinthians 4, 10, 11, and 12. He's talking about his tribulations and his persecutions. You know, if we come on to television with a big grin, giving our viewers the idea that with us everything is simply wonderful and everything in the garden is rosy, we are not doing anything good for our listeners, because I'm aware that that's not the world that you live in. Sure, we can have joy and sure we can have victory, but the truth is this: we go through tribulation, we go through trouble, we go through battles. In fact, the Apostle Paul tells us why we go through these things. and gives us understanding how we can come through successfully on the other side. So in 2 Corinthians 4 verse 10, having given a list of some of the things he's gone through for the sake of the gospel, he then says these words, always bearing about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus. He was beaten, as you know. He was shipwrecked. He was in perils by his own countrymen and by false brethren. He had a cat o' nine tails. There was over 2,000 marks on his back. That you can actually count that up in the Bible. Over 2,000. His back at times must have looked just like a bloody mess. And he said that this, what he suffered for the preaching of the gospel and for the sake of Christ, he likened it to bearing about in his body the dying of the Lord Jesus. But of course he said Jesus did not only die, Jesus rose again. And he said, if I bear about in my body the dying of the Lord Jesus, he said it's because that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest through this body. In other words, he said, I am going through all of this in order that I can deliver you life. It looks like I have a sentence of death on me. That's the word he used. That's the very term he used. He said, this is a sentence of death. But he said, I'm putting up with this so that I can get to you with the glorious good news of the gospel. So, he said, it means that death works in me, but life works in you. I'm going to say a special word to pastors and Christian leaders in just a second or two, although it in some ways applies to everybody. But listen to what he says in verse 11. For we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake. He's simply talking about Thlipsis. He's talking about being squeezed and about being pressured. In fact, the word comes from to mean pressure. In the old days under Old English law, for example, and William Barclay brings this out, one of the ways they had to execute people was they would make them just lay on the ground there and they would put something very heavy on their chest. Just imagine if you had a big cement block on your chest and then another one and another one and another one until the rib cage gives way and the person just died from the pressure. Thlipsis, Paul's using that to describe the pressure, the battles, the struggles of life that he's in because he's a Christian and because he's a preacher of the gospel. And he said, I always go about being delivered unto death for Jesus' sake. You see, it's one thing to preach about the victory of the gospel. That's true. It's another thing to give the idea that we can willy-nilly just be happy all day long and give our viewers the impression that somehow or other if they're not enjoying this, then there's something wrong with them, which can only be rectified if they send us some money. That is totally a wrong presentation. All who live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer pressure, tribulation, Thlipsis, that which is sent by the devil to crush us, to squeeze us to the point where we will break. Now, of course, by God's grace, we will not, but that's the purpose of it. And you need to learn some things so that this pressure will not break you that you're going through at the moment. There's an old song that says, don't carry that load. You'll break if you do. And what do you do if you are carrying the load and you can't get out from under it? Well, we're going to look at that. For we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh. So we are bringing you a life, but we want you to know that we're going through the sentence of death in order to bring it to you. And then these remarkable words in verse 12. So this is 2 Corinthians 4, verse 12. So then, the little summary, so then death worketh in us, but life in you. Pastor, preacher, leader, ever wondered why you go through so much? Through so many battles, so many struggles, so many attacks on your mind, your money, your church, your family, whatever it is? Well, I'll tell you what it is. The devil is wanting to stop you from bringing the good news of the gospel and of God's comfort to others. But in order to bring that life, you have to go through death. That doesn't mean that you literally die. Paul didn't literally die. Well, eventually he did. He was executed. But at this time, he described this as all the pressures he was going through as the sentence of death in order to bring life to people. Let me tell you about this ministry. And it's not the greatest in the world or the most significant. What is the greatest? What is the most significant anyway? We just do what God tells us to do. But whatever it is that God has put into my hands, I can tell you this, the battles are fierce. Sometimes it's just day after day after day. I'm not going to sit here and give you the idea that everything's perfect. Everything's not. It's war. And I know that as I deliver life to people, and one man was kind enough to say, he said, Leslie, every time you open your mouth, life flows out. That was very kind. But let me tell you, death worketh in me in order that life may work in you. And it applies to all Christians to some degrees, but especially those that are in leadership. My goodness, we go through death, through tribulation, trouble, thlipsis, pressure, in order that we may bring life unto the people. So it's a struggle, it's a battle, it's an attack all day long. Some days it just seems never to lift up, and you get one discouragement after another, one brick wall after another, one setback after another, but we made up our minds we're not going to quit. We are going to go through with God. So then, death worketh in us, but life in you. So if you're going to lead men, if you're going to be a preacher or a deliverer of people, death is going to work in you, and that means a sentence of death. That means tremendous thlipsis, pressure, battles. Now that was 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And now I'm going to go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 1 this time. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And I'm going to read verse 4. 2 Corinthians 1, verse 4. Have you got it in your Bible there? I hope you do. Who comforteth us. Now I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to start verse 3, just to kind of make more sense of it. So that's 2 Corinthians 1, verse 3. Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, and the God of all comfort. The God of all comfort. We'll come to this in a moment as well. Fortis. 9 times over in the next few verses, this word comfort is used, to comfort or comforted or consolation or whatever. The comfort of God which makes us brave. God has a comfort, a special comfort, consolation, bravery for those that are going through thlipsis, those that are going through tribulation or trouble. So he says here, blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. Now get it, who comforteth us in all our tribulation. Thlipsis is the word. That we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble. Now why our translators use 2 different words here, tribulation and trouble, when it's the same in the Greek, I do not know. It's thlipsis both times. Pressure to the point where a man can take no more. It could be financial pressure. It could be the pressure of persecution. It could be the pressure of opposition. But it's because you're a Christian and the devil's fighting you. Well, it's the same as I've said. It's the same in the Greek, but I'll read it to you the way it is here. It uses 2 English words, tribulation and trouble. Actually, if you want to go even further for tribulation, listen to this. Tribulation, you go back to the Latin now, tracing it through the English, is tribulum. And you know what tribulum is? Literally, to thresh with a sledgehammer. To thresh with a sledgehammer. So tribulum or tribulation, thlipsis, pressure, is to be beaten and beaten repeatedly in the battles of life. Somebody, as it were, giving you a kicking. We're not talking about literally, although it could be that too. We're talking about the affairs and the situations of life, the pressures of life. And I don't have to try to explain that any further. You know what I mean about the pressures of life. Anything from a flat tire to all-out opposition to being physically attacked, whatever it is. because you name the name of Christ. And you know, you just don't get attacked in scriptural things or when you're going to church. The devil will come against you in all the affairs of life. And so what is tribulation? Latin tribulum. It means to thresh with a sledge, which is a sledgehammer, to beat the daylights out of, literally. Now, by the way, in a little bit, I'm going to give you a break here, not yet, but when I do, you can get the notes of all this free and postpaid. You're just going to have to ask for $2.48, but don't go to the phone yet. I'll give you a chance later, but $2.48, you can get all this. Who comforteth us. Now, the word comfort here, fortis. Who gives us fortis. God's fortis, God's fortitude, God's bravery in the middle of having the daylights beaten out of you by life. This is what Paul's talking about. And you need to know these Greek and Latin words to get the depth of it. Who comforteth, God has a special gift of bravery. Corrie ten Boom, you know, was a dear friend of mine and my family. And I've had people say, and Corrie answered this herself, you know, I could never have endured what Corrie did. Well, of course, you don't need that degree of grace, probably, because you've never gone through that. But should you ever have to go through what she went through, you could endure it too, because God would give you that measure of grace. There is a measure of grace for whatever you're going through, so that you don't have to be defeated. And although tribulation, Thlipsis comes to pressure you to the point of breaking, you don't have to break, because God has got a special grace of bravery, fortitude, to comfort you with, so that you will not break, but you will come through victoriously. Who comforteth us in all our tribulations, Thlipsis is the word, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. Now, down the line here in this message, you're going to see two of the reasons for the pressures that come against us. There's possibly more, but the Bible clearly gives us two reasons why we go through such difficulties, why we have the sentence of death in us, when all we're trying to do is to give life to others. Wouldn't you think, if you're bringing good news to people, that everybody would tip their hat to you and make things easy for you? Instead of that, we got to suffer, quote, death in order to bring life. Why is it? The Bible tells us there are two reasons. Paul said that he was pressed, there it is again, beyond measure. Number one, that he may learn not to trust in himself. Now, if it took Paul a period of time of going through tribulum in order to learn that lesson, where do we come in? So you go through a lot in order that you may learn not to trust yourself and to totally rely on God, because without Him you can do nothing. And the second reason Paul says why we go through so many things is this. Because when you go through the tribulum and you get the fortis, or you get the comfort of God, when that happens, you will learn the secrets of victory. You will learn trust. You will learn how to stand in God's promises. You will learn the consolation of the Holy Spirit. And having learned these things in the valley of weeping, the valley of Baca, you can then share them with others who are going through similar or other kind of tribulum or tribulation or Thlipsis. So there are two reasons. One is that you learn not to trust in yourself. Start trusting in God. The arm of flesh will fail you. You dare not trust your own. And also, if you will refuse to quit and you'll accept God's comfort, fortis is the word from the Latin, God's bravery. There's a third word which we'll come to in a moment or two, God's bravery. Then not only will you be delivered, you will learn the secrets of God, that you will be able to comfort others wherewith you yourself have been comforted. We are talking about the pressures of life and the purpose in those pressures. We're learning Greek words, and we're learning a Latin word too, and trying to get to the depth of what Paul is talking about, because repeatedly he talks about tribulation. As a matter of fact, this word Thlipsis, or pressure, is the exact word that's used for the 7-year period at the end, which is referred to as the tribulation period. And so this is a well-known word, and again it means pressure, to squeeze, to crush. In fact, let me just read you a little note here. In medicine, this word is used, and it says here in medicine, Thlipsis means compression or constriction of vessels, especially by an external cause. That's a direct quote from Webster's dictionary. And so we all go through these pressures. It is flat out wrong, one more time I say it, to give Christians the idea that just by praying a few magical words or sending a few dollars that they're going to be, you know, happy forevermore without any troubles. You tune into this Irish preacher and I'll tell you, you start living for God and all hell will break out. It's like, you know, you get saved and then somebody attacks you and the war just starts. And Paul's dealing with it. How do you deal with the pressures of life? He himself said he was pressed beyond measure, above strength, so that he believed he was going to break. He said, I despaired. The Apostle Paul despaired, even of his very life. Why? That he may learn not to trust in himself, to commit everything to God, to rest in the promises, and to learn things in the valley when he was being beaten by the sledgehammer called tribulum, Latin, from which we get tribulation. Then, having learned those lessons, he can comfort others who are going through the valley after him. This is what he's dealing with here in Corinthians. So back to verse 4, 2 Corinthians 1. Who comforteth us, God gives us special bravery. That's exactly what fortis means. Special dispensation of bravery in all our tribulum, Thlipsis, pressures, that we may be able to comfort, that we may be able to extend to others God's grace of bravery, which are in any trouble or any tribulation, that's others, by the same comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. What God teaches us, we can teach others. It'll apply to them. It'll work for them. A special dispensation of comfort. Well, what about you, Leslie? Have things been easy? Easy. I've been to hell and back, it seems to be. The war's on. These are the last days. Especially if you're preaching a pure message. Let me tell you, you'll be attacked on every side. So be it. God gives us a special dispensation of bravery, even when in the natural we would be full of fear. For it says in verse 5, for as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also aboundeth in Christ. In other words, because we're living for God, tribulation is everywhere. But likewise, because God matches, as it were, whatever the enemy is doing, God gives us grace and greater grace and more abundant grace. Therefore, he said, not only am I abounding in tribulation, I am abounding also in comfort and in the consolation of Christ. And I'll be able to pass that on to you. Verse 6. And whether we be afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation. We're going through this to deliver life to you, which is effectual. Now, he says, in the enduring. He said, what God's given to me is effectual in helping me to endure the valley of Thlipsis. That's what it means, the tribulum, when you're getting the daylights beaten out of you by life. He said, I'm able to endure. But the word endure, hupomone, which I told you about earlier, that Greek word does not mean enduring in the kind of, grit the teeth, I'm disgusted type of endurance. It's endurance with the assurance of hope and triumph. Now, I'll read from certain books to you in just a moment and confirm all this further. But he says, verse 6, and whether we be afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation, which is effectual in the enduring of the same sufferings which we suffer. This will work for you like it's working for us. Plenty of tribulation, plenty of bravery from God to go through and to endure with the hope of triumph. Marvelous, friends. Or whether we be comforted, it is for your consolation and salvation. So whether I'm going through the tribulation or the comfort, it's all for your sake, so that I can deliver blessing unto you. And our hope to you is steadfast, knowing that as ye are partakers of the sufferings, so ye will be partakers of the consolation. I'm going to read a little bit of William Barclay. It kind of sums up what I have been saying. This is William Barclay, The Letter to the Corinthians. A little book that anybody can buy in any Christian bookstore. You ought to get it. Paul writes as a man who knows trouble to those who are in trouble. The word that he uses for affliction is Thlipsis. In ordinary Greek, this word always describes actual physical pressure on a man. R.C. Trench writes, when, according to the ancient law of England, those who willfully refused to plead had heavy weights placed upon their breasts, and were so pressed and crushed to death, and this was literally Thlipsis, the pressures of life. Sometimes there falls upon a man's spirit the burden and the mystery of this unintelligible world. In the early years of Christianity, the man who chooses to become a Christian chooses to face trouble. There might well come to him abandonment by his own family, hostility from his heathen neighbors, and persecution from the official powers. Samuel Rutherford wrote to one of his friends, God has called you to Christ's side, and the wind is now in Christ's face in this land, and seeing ye are with him, ye cannot expect the lee side or the sunny side of the brae. It is always a costly thing to be a real Christian, for there can be no Christianity without the cross. Now what Paul's saying, sure there's tribulation, but there's also the ability to endure it filled with hope, because God gives a special dispensation of fortis, bravery, to bring you through. Therefore, no matter what the test is, no matter what the tribulation, Thlipsis, there is fortis to match it. The answer to this suffering, Barclay says, it lies in endurance. The Greek word for this endurance is hupomone. I told you about that. The keynote of hupomone is not grim, bleak acceptance of trouble, but rather triumph. It describes the spirit which can not only accept suffering, but triumphs over it. Someone once said to a sufferer, suffering colors life, doesn't it? The sufferer replied, yes, but I propose to choose the color. Now, right now, I'm not talking about, for instance, physical suffering in the sense of sickness. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the persecutions and the pressures of life, because you dare stand for Christ and you dare stand against the devil. You know, it could be somebody in your own family opposing you. It could be an uncooperative boss or employee or a sales clerk or anything. Pressures of life. As the silver comes purer from the fire, so the Christian can emerge finer and stronger from hard days. The Christian is the athlete of God whose spiritual muscles become stronger from the discipline of difficulties. Now let's just summarize all this in just a quick moment. What we're talking about, Paul is talking about, he said, death is in me so that life's in you, because I'm trying to bring you the good news, but the devil's fighting me all the time. The word is Thlipsis. It's terrible pressure I'm under. But he said, because of it, I've got a dispensation of the comfort of God, of God's bravery. And he gives me the ability to endure, not just bleak, grim endurance, but endurance attached to hope and triumph, because God always matches the problem with His grace and His ability to overcome. Now you see on your screen immediately a repeat of what happened earlier. These are the words that Paul is dealing with, or the root of them. Thlipsis, trouble, tribulation, pressure. The word that we get tribulation from is a Latin word, tribulum, literally to beat with a sledgehammer. Paul said he went through that. That number is where you can look it up in Strong's. Hupomone, you see the second one there. That hupomone, you know what it is? It is endurance. But endurance attached to hope, not just hopeless waiting. There's a big difference. Number 3 is fortis. That is the dispensation of special bravery which gives you comfort, which will automatically come from God when you're in tribulum. because God will never allow the devil to attack you to a degree that you cannot have grace to overcome. Now go immediately to the next one. There you see our second page, Thlipsis. It means trouble and tribulation. Hupomone is endurance attached to hope. Fortis is the word for comfort or the special dispensation of bravery for those who are going through the valley. Now come back to me. Now you have seen there what we're trying to talk about. Paul's saying you're going to get the daylights beaten out of you by life. It's like a death sentence. But through it, you will learn some things. You will learn God's special dispensation of bravery, endurance attached to hope that otherwise you wouldn't ever know about. You're going to be able to deliver that in the same measure to others and teach them. Plus, you will learn the greatest lesson of all, how not to trust in yourself. Continuing with Barclay. But we are not left to face this trial or these trials and to provide this endurance alone. There comes to us the comfort of God. Between verse 3 and 7, the noun comfort, or the verb to comfort, occurs no fewer than 9 times. Comfort in the New Testament always means far more than mere soothing sympathy. Always it is true to its root meaning. For its root is the Latin fortis, and fortis always means bravery. Christian comfort is the comfort which brings courage, guts, and enables a man to cope with all that life can throw at him. Paul was quite sure that God never sends a man a vision without the power to work it out, and never sends him a task without the strength to do it. Isn't that powerful? If there's time, I'll go back to a bit more of that, but let me jump back in a verse here. Verse 8, I read this a few weeks ago, continuing 2 Corinthians chapter 1. For we would not, brethren, have you ignorant. Paul said, I'm not going to cover up the fact that we had Thlipsis, we had trouble, verse 8, tribulation, all over Asia. In fact, he said we were pressured beyond measure and above strength, so that we thought we were going to die. But he said we find out, verse 9, why we had this sentence of death in ourselves. It was to teach us not to trust in ourselves, but to trust in God, who can raise the dead. Maybe it looks like, what you were believing for has died. Well, you trust God, and God can raise it from the dead. He can do anything. He's God. He's terrific. So Paul's talking about what? Thlipsis, tribulum. Getting the daylights beaten out of you with life. Pressures, sentence of death. But for God to give you the special dispensation of courage and bravery, which helps you to endure with hope so that you can conquer and say like Paul, who went to hell and back, as it were, figure of speech, in all these things I am more than a conqueror. Here is a remarkable scripture in Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 18. Let me repeat that for you. Hebrews 2 and verse 18, talking about Christ. For in that he himself hath suffered being tempted, or tested is the word, he is able to succor or help them that are tempted. In other words, Christ himself went through the Thlipsis and is able, because of what he suffered, able to give you the help of God going through it. Therefore, it really means there is no such thing as anything ever coming your way that you cannot whip with God's help. Now, I don't want to say that in some cheap way. I would avoid that at all costs, because you see and hear these success seminars and some of the similar things in Christian TV, send a few dollars and everything's all right. I'm not saying that. But I am saying there will be endurance, there will be tribulum, there will be getting beaten with a sledgehammer in the affairs of life. But God promises sufficient grace to cause you to overcome so that you and God together can defeat anything that comes your way, because though it looks like you're coming to the breaking point, crushed to break, that's what the devil wants, you won't actually get to that breaking point. Here's a terrific book here. I don't know if you can see that properly or not, but I'll tell you what it is. It is the complete word study dictionary of the New Testament by Spiro Zodhiates. And I give you some numbers there for Thlipsis and hupomone. And I want to read just a little bit from him on Thlipsis. It's number 2347, which is the same as the Strong's. He said Thlipsis, which is translated trouble, tribulation, and Paul uses it. It's all over the New Testament. It means to crush, to pressure, to compress, to squeeze. It's tribulation, it's trouble, and it's to the point to cause the person to break. Now he also says this, tribulation or Thlipsis then to the early Christians meant not so much ill health, poverty, or loss of friends. See, there's certain things that Jesus died for that we don't have to suffer the penalty for our own sin. Jesus died for our sins and for our sicknesses. Now He can help us whatever the situation is, but there's some things we do suffer, some things we don't, because He already suffered them for us. But we do suffer persecution and the pressures of life. But here's what Spiro Zodhiates says. Thlipsis then, to the early Christians, meant not so much ill health, poverty, or loss of friends, but the sacrifices they had to make and the perils they had to meet from their proclamation or their profession of Christ. So we're not talking about defeatism, and we're not talking about not taking the benefits of Calvary for our salvation and for our healing. God wants to do those things for us. But there are other things and the other crosses that we do have to bear. Let me just give you this one other one quickly, if I can grab it here. It's number 5281. And here's what it is, that hupomone. And it says here, hupomone, which is that endurance. But what kind of endurance? Spiro Zodhiates says, 5281, it is the endurance that's associated with hope. Not just grimly holding on hopelessly. That's terrible. It's associated with hope and refers to that quality of character which does not allow one to surrender to circumstances or to succumb under the trial. So God gives us this supernatural endurance associated with hope that we know we're coming through, and we get it because of the special dispensation of fortitude, bravery, grace to take us through the Thlipsis, the tribulum, the tribulation, which was sent to stop us from living for God and delivering God's life to others. Paul went through all this. Let me give you the last little bit that I was going to read of Barclay. Let me just, there's so much in this. Even apart from that, there is always a certain inspiration in any suffering which a man's Christianity may incur, for such suffering, as Paul puts it, is the overflow of Christ's suffering reaching to us. I'm talking now about persecutions and battles for Christ's sake. It is a sharing in the suffering of Christ. Remember, Jesus said, if they hated you, they'll hate me also. In the old days of chivalry, the knights used to come demanding some specially difficult task in order that they might show their devotion to the lady whom they loved. To suffer for Christ is a privilege. When the hard thing comes, the Christian can say, as old Polycarp, the aged bishop of Smyrna, said, when they bound him to the stake, I thank thee, O God, that thou hast judged me worthy of this hour. The supreme result of all this is that we gain the power to comfort others who are going through it also. Paul claims that the things which have happened to him and the comfort which he has received have made him to be able to be a source of comfort to others. Do you get any comfort from this telecast? Can you feel our sincerity? Do you know that we're real? Do you understand the Scriptures as we seek to explain them? Does life come to you? Well, very well. Let me tell you. Death came to me in order to bring that life to you. Struggles and battles and oppositions, every kind of thing would seek to force me to stop, to quit, to be discouraged. Every brick wall, even to rob me of time to study, which I will not allow, but that's what the devil would want. We pay a price to deliver. No, we're not complaining. We're not saying it in a whining way. We're just saying it the way Paul said it, to put into perspective why you're going through the pressures of life and what is the purpose. I know I've said it 5 times already. Here it is again, in 2 parts. You're going through these things, tribulum, being beaten with a sledgehammer, in the affairs and the pressures of life, that you may learn not to trust yourself. Far too many of us worship the God of self-reliance. But rather that we may trust God, and also that we will have comfort whereby we can comfort others. Now, we're almost through. And we have given you words, Thlipsis, tribulation, to be beat up by life, as it were. But then hupomone, remember that marvelous word too, which is endurance with hope and knowledge of deliverance. And fortes, God's special gift of bravery to carry you through. It's all for 2 reasons: that you may learn not to trust in yourself, and that you may be able to give others the same kind of blessing that you received, because you learned these secrets going through the valley. So cheer up, brother and sister. The battle is tough sometimes, but there's purposes in the pressures, and God is with you.